This channel has been set up to make sure that anyone can observe our democratic meetings. Please therefore remember that this meeting can be watched by anyone at any time with an internet connection. There is a delay between the meeting and the broadcast on the YouTube channel of approximately 30 seconds. Webcasting officer, please can you commence the broadcast and confirm, please?
Hi, Emma, we're live now.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Governance Group. Before we commence with the proceedings, I can confirm that the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for its remote meetings, and these include the following. Please only speak when the Chairman invites you to do so. Members, please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak through the chat function. The Chairman will introduce speakers in the order which they have made their request to speak, unless there is a point of order at which we will give way. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting. We ask you to mute your microphone when you are not speaking and to consider turning off your video to reduce any interference on the audio feed. Please bear in mind that there may be a lag between speakers and other attendees hearing you. There is no presentations for this evening. The committee reports have been provided to you. If they have any problems with the broadcast this evening, please indicate on the chat function. When referring to reports, please quote the page number and paragraph number. For this meeting, there is no private business. However, we'd like to remind members that it is their responsibility to make sure that their venue and connection is secure. If you lose connection at any point and unable to rejoin the meeting, please email me at my normal email address and I will respond to you to assist you coming back into the meeting. Please only use the chat function for the purpose prescribed for requesting to speak or for a point of order. The chat function is subject to the rules of access of information regimes such as FOI/EIR. It is also subject to data protection, rules of defamation and the Council's Code of Conduct. For this meeting, councillors are identified with a prefix of CLLR before their name. Officers are in attendance and they are identified with a prefix of officer. For this meeting, we have a meeting facilitator and a minute taker. I can confirm that this meeting is quorum and may proceed. The members of the Corporate Governance Group consist of the following members. The Chairman is Richard Van Dolken, the Vice Chairman is Hilton Johnson. The members of the committee include Paul Eusden, David Mann, Vanessa Santamoro, Dean Wallace, Tom Walsh, Lynn Walters and Hilton Johnson. We have received one apology for this evening and that is from Tom Walsh. There are officers present in this meeting. These include Trevor Wilson, Head of Finance, Bill Myers, Financial Services Manager, Angela Mitchell, Audit, Insurance and Fraud Manager, Chris Fleeton, Corporate Director, Kim Cole, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer, Steve Bladen from BDO, who is the Council's Auditor. The clerk is Jessica Mann and my name is Emma Wisby and I'm the meeting facilitator. I will now hand over to Councillor Van Dolken, the Chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Emma. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Governance Group. My name is Councillor Richard Van Dolken and I am the Chairman. I'm being assisted by a governance officer and a meeting facilitator who will help me identify when people wish to speak and manage the notifications through the chat function. I can't see all of you, so please let me know using the chat function if there are any issues with your internet connection. Please also remember to mute your microphone when you finish speaking. Members, for this meeting, when I seek your agreement, silence will be taken as assent. As the meeting facilitator has confirmed the attendance of members and officers for this meeting, I shall now proceed with the business of the meeting. So agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Chairman, there are no further apologies to be given in addition to Councillor Walsh. But however, Chairman, before we commence this meeting, I was unable to admit Steve Bladen from BDO. Could we just please test his connection just in case you do need to put any questions to him? So, good evening, Mr. Bladen. Could we just check your connection, please? Good evening, Mr. Bladen. Could you just acknowledge, please? Good evening, Mr. Bladen. Could you just test your microphone, please? We've got an indication that your microphone is switched off. I'm ever so sorry, Chairman. It doesn't appear that we can make contact with Mr. Bladen. However, as he's just here to support members if they've got any problems, I will message Mr. Bladen to see if I can get the functionality at the right point. So, Chairman, could I invite you to continue with the next item on the agenda, which is the declarations of interest, please?
Sorry, the minutes of the agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting.
Apologies, Chairman, that's my error.
Right. Members, for this item, I'll be seeking your agreement. This is the minutes of the previous meeting. Therefore, silence will be assent. However, if a member wishes to raise an issue in respect to the minutes, please indicate via the chat function. Do any members have any objection to the approval of the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting held on the 11th of August 2020? Thank you, members. Your silence is agreement that the minutes are an accurate record. Thank you, and we proceed to item 3, public question time. Members, there are no registered speakers for this evening's public question time, so I'll proceed to item 4, declaration of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? Please state the item and the nature of your interest, and please indicate if you wish to speak in the chat function. I see no declarations, so I will therefore proceed to agenda item 5, key financial indicators, as of the 30th of September 2020. Members, the report is set out on pages 6 to 10 of the agenda. Can I please invite Trevor Wilson, Head of Finance, to set out the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This is the usual report in respect of the key financial indicators for the authority. This is looking at the half-year situation, so up to the 30th of September. The first bit looks at our spend against the general fund and against the general fund budget, which was set by yourselves in February, with a net budget of 15.226 million. The initial snapshot shows that there's a negative variance of 243,000 for the year. But I suppose the more important thing that has been exercising us through this whole period is the impact that the council has been facing and the financial impact of the COVID on the council. On page 6 at item B, you'll see that we have been doing regular assessments on the financial impact to central government. This has been able to inform them about the level of support that authorities would be looking for in terms of the issues that we're being faced with. You'll see at this time the submission on the 2nd of October, the cost of additional expenditure and of the estimated reduction in income was just over 3.6 million. The lion's share of that is the reduction in income of just over 2.5 million. But obviously that was actual up until the half year, and then the projection for the remainder of the year. And obviously that is subject to conjecture, and as much as how is the level of recovery going to be achieved over those next 6 months. But assumptions have been made that there'll be some recovery, but obviously we won't be back into the full level of achieving the budgets by the year end. At that stage of doing the return, we'd had 1.724 million of emergency funding from the government in 3 tranches of funds that have been paid over to us. And on top of that, the government had introduced a scheme whereby they'd recognised that in terms of the sales, fees and charges, there were going to be irrecoverable losses that the councils were going to be facing. And so they introduced a compensation scheme. and you'll see that we'd made an application in respect to the first 4 months where we were anticipating 411,000, and we're waiting for confirmation at this time that that is going to be paid to us. On the next page, it say that the accountants are doing a more detailed look at the half year and projecting forward, and that's going to be reported to Cabinet on the 23rd of November. What that's identified is that the level of net cost to the authority has reduced slightly. We're now saying that that will be 3.25 million due to the COVID impact. There have been some improvements in some areas of the income that we've seen, not least land charges income. There's been an increase in activity, and the level that we're expecting there has increased from what we'd originally anticipated. So 3.25 million is the anticipated shortfall. On the 22nd of October, we have had notice from central government that there's going to be a 4th tranche of support from the emergency fund, and the amount that the authority has been allocated is 228,000. We estimate that the total amount of sales fees and charges compensation could be just over £750,000. So that would mean totally we would have just under £2.9 million worth of support from central government against our total costs of £3.25 million. There have been some variations in terms of the salaries. There are some underspends, and the efficiency factor is being achieved. A number of posts, particularly new posts that we'd envisaged that were going to be occupied or filled in the current year, they've actually been delayed for various reasons, but we will be looking to fill those. There has been an additional cost pressure on the council. The pay award that was due on the 1st of April of this year, that was finally agreed, and that came out at 2.75. So that was agreement between the employers' organisation and the unions, and that has meant an additional cost to the authority of 135,000 because of we'd estimated at 2% for budget purposes, and that is going to be met from balances in the current year, but obviously will need to be found in next year when we start looking at next year's budget. I think as far as the income, the rental income from commercial industrial, I think that's holding up particularly well, and it's particularly pleasing to note that all of our properties were occupied at 30th of September. So given the circumstances with which the team and the businesses are having to operate, that's an excellent position that we find ourselves in. Capital programme, substantial capital programme for the authority in the current year, and at point F on page 7, listing out some of the details in terms of the projects and the level of spend that has been incurred to this time. Other things to draw to members' attention: council tax collectible, just under 98 million is the collectible debit that we're expecting for the year. In terms of collection at the end of September, 57.63%, slightly down on this time last year. But in terms of when we've just received information for authorities across Essex, then that is one of the top collection rates. And that's so whilst we're obviously acutely aware of the situation and our customers find themselves in, and that the collection rate has been holding up particularly well, and that so not quite the same for business rates. The amount that we're actually collecting this year is down on previous years. This is due to the level of reliefs that the government has made available to particularly retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, that they will not have any rates to pay for the current financial year. So in terms of what we're looking at as the collectible amount is 26.52 million. So normally that's around in excess of 40 million. In terms of amount collected, 14.5 million, and collection rate of 54.9, and that is some 3 percentage points down on this point last year. There's some details about the write-offs, which generally are low and continue to be low. And then normally I'd present details of the Treasury management activity for the first half year, but that is provided in a separate report. So rather than duplicating that information, members, we got to full details in the report that will be presented by Phil Myers later on the agenda. So that hasn't been duplicated. So as far as the overall position is concerned, say the monies that we're receiving from government are very welcome and are almost covering the anticipated costs that we have, or that we anticipate the authority will be facing. I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Do any members wish to speak on this item? Okay, well, everyone's happy. I think it's, despite the obvious problems and issues and the shortfall in income, we can be thankful that the government has responded in a very positive way, and also it's very creditable that we've been collecting most rents. I suppose it's creditable as well regarding the people of Braintree who managed to keep paying their council tax, and that we have one of the top collection rates in Essex. That's good to know. So no further points, members. I think we'll move on then to we need to accept the report. I'll take silence as agreement. Do I take it that the report has been accepted? Thank you, members. The report is accepted, and we will now proceed to agenda item 6, internal audit update, including progress against audit plan 2020-2021, which is Angela Mitchell, audit manager.
Apologies, Chairman, for interrupting, but could I just ask that we test the connection to Mr. Bladen, just in case a question is asked of him. Mr. Bladen, could you just confirm that you can hear us, please, by switching off your microphone, please?
Hi, Emma. Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bladen. Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Angie. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 6 is the internal audit update, including progress against the 2021 internal audit plan, which was approved by this committee in July. The section 2 of the report on page 13 identifies a list of audits which have been completed since the last report to this committee. There is an additional one which should be on that list. My apologies, Chairman, for its omission, and that is performance management, which achieved a significant assurance rating. The details of that report is with all the others in the appendix 2 at the end of this report. The rest of that section 2 just identifies some of the other activity that has been undertaken by the team, including by myself, and just to draw your attention, the majority of my time since the last report to this committee has been spent on insurance matters, primarily the 5-yearly insurance tender, but a number of other insurance related matters as well. Section 3 on page 13 confirms that there have been no RIPA or IPA applications in 2021 to date. Appendix 1 summarises the progress against the 2021 internal audit plan and notes a number of items being reported to this committee in line with that list in Appendix 2, and the details of those reports are in Appendix 2. And Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Angie. Members, anyone wish to speak on this item? You've obviously done a very good job, Angela.
Chairman, Councillor Mann, I believe, wishes to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Councillor Mann, sorry, you're still mute.
A question in relation to the sort of Manor Street project, if that's all right. I mean, looking at it in terms of controls, guidance, those management terms, it looks like a total car crash. Limited assurance, how far off no assurance were we on that? And I noticed that it hasn't run its course yet, that it's still pending sort of management approval. But can you assure me that if there are any lessons to be learnt from this project, they are sort of currently being applied, that we're not waiting until it's sort of totally signed off before perhaps we learn some lessons from it?
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Yes, it was some way off no assurance. There are a number of controls that are operating and in place in relation to the big projects. So limited assurance is an appropriate classification. The corporate director is in the process of agreeing the response to the recommendations raised with the management team, and those responses will be reported back to this committee in future. He is obviously mindful of the importance of the area and the need for effective controls, and yes, it is being given full attention at that level. Does that help?
Councillor Eusden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I noticed that only one of the completed audits achieved full assurance. Is this acceptable? Is this normal for local authorities, or are we performing better than others? It just seems that we are, if we're not achieving full assurance, does that mean we're falling short in things that we're doing? And if we are, what is being done to move the other 5 or 6 significance into full assurance? Or is that, you know, not being familiar with audit processes and so on, is that totally unreasonable to expect that you would get full assurance on everything, and it's more I don't want to use the word fluke, but it's more unusual to achieve full assurance and most likely to achieve significant? And I just wondered how we compared to other districts. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is quite normal. We do look at the things that are we consider to be most important to the council, and I would hope that we do a robust review. But the outcomes and the recommendations that we make are intended to be a positive contribution to services to assist them to develop their controls and ensure that we have any weaknesses mitigated. So it's not a bad thing. Significant assurance is still good. The recommendations that are being made are not really major weaknesses, but they are significant enough to warrant inclusion in a report. and for consideration by the responsible managers. But that it's not a terrible situation to be in.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Angela. If no other members wish to speak, I'd just like to follow up what Councillor Mann was saying about the Manor Street project, which is, well, one of our two largest projects, and I would imagine that the people involved having to deal with the pedestrianisation and the Horizon 120 must have been a very busy time. But I'm hoping, or I'm assuming, that it is within our remit as a group to ask to see a copy of this action plan. Can I ask the governance officer if that's there's not a problem there, is there?
Sorry, sorry, Chairman. It's absolutely appropriate for you to ask for a copy of that once it's been finalised and completed.
Well, I thank you very much, and I hope that it comes soon. I mean, this is a big amount of money. As I was told earlier, you know, this year we've spent more money than we probably ever have in the council on capital projects, and we want to make sure this money is used properly and effectively. So can we make a note that we would like to see the action plan as soon as it is available?
Absolutely, Chair. If I could agree with that. I mean, our function, after all, is to scrutinise and hold to account. And
Absolutely.
if something is amiss here in any way, then we ought to be alive to it.
Chairman, would you wish that to be an action point to be actually noted within the minutes as a part of the permanent record?
I think that would be perfectly acceptable. Indeed, we should do that. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll arrange that. Thank you.
So I don't have any other further points. Thank you very much, Angie, for, as usual, for your assiduous work on these projects, on these audits, and we can move on, I think, to another one. The we note this report, I think. Any members not agree that we should note this? I'll take silence as agreement. Thank you very much. The report is noted, and we will now proceed to agenda item 7, Audit Charter, October 2020-21. That's, can I invite Angela Mitchell to set out the report?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a refresh of the previous internal audit charter, and the issues that have been updated in this document relate to the revised committee structure. So it now refers obviously to the corporate governance group, and also page 31, the reference to non-audit operational functions has also been updated to reflect a change in some of the functions that the team operate. Apart from that, it's pretty reflective of the previous version. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, members? If not, I'd like to just ask, please, if Angie, on page 32, number 10, resources, can I ask if you consider that your resources of your team are sufficient?
Yeah, so I have a senior auditor and a trainee auditor, and obviously with reference to the previous report and my time being spent on insurance, those two officers have maintained progression of work in line with the internal audit plan, and the level of resourcing there is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think just to make it clear, I just marked up here that on the definitions, I think it's worth just noting it, that the governance group charged with independent assurance on the adequacy of the risk management framework, the internal control environment, and the integrity of financial reporting is the corporate governance group ourselves. And also, just so we're aware, the audit manager, Angie, reports functionally to ourselves, the corporate governance group, and organizationally to the head of finance, Trevor Wilson. So members, this report here, we're asked to approve the report. I'll take silence as agreement. Do I take it the report has been approved? Thank you, members. The report has been approved, and we'll now proceed to agenda item 8, updated anti-money laundering policy.
Apologies, Chairman, sorry to interrupt you, but Councillor Santamora has indicated with a hands up function on the Zoom meeting. Could I just inquire if that whether Councillor Santamora has a question?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Just absolutely note the report, approve the report, but just there's a typographical error, I think, page 34, the last sentence. If there is significant, it says conformance. I'm assuming non-conformance. That was all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Thank you very much, Councillor Santamora. So we are printing on both sides here. Yeah, agenda item 8, updated anti-money laundering policy. This is set out on pages 35 to 46 of the agenda. And can I invite once more Angie Mitchell to set out the report?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a refresh of the policy last approved in June 2009, and I'm grateful to various colleagues identified on page 37 for their contribution to this report. The money laundering guidance, policy and forms just draws attention to the council status in relation to the legal requirements and the money laundering, terrorist financing and transfer of funds information on the payer regulations 2017 says that whilst local authorities are not directly covered by the requirements, the CITFA has indicated that we should be complying with the underlying spirit of the legislation and regulations. So this policy obviously reflects the requirements in those legislations. The policy gives definitions, states council obligations, states the money laundering reporting officer as Trevor Wilson and the deputy as myself. It identifies client identification procedures and disclosure procedures. Paragraph 7.3 reminds us that officers are reminded that tipping off is a serious offence. Paragraph 8 refers to the legislation, and again paragraph 9 details the money laundering offences. There's some general guidance on page 43 with some examples of the types of activity where money laundering could be encountered. And at the end of this report are the relevant forms to enable people to report any concerns to the money laundering reporting officer. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Angie. Do any members wish to speak or comment on this item? If so, please indicate on the chat function. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I could just make one point. Page 39, item 5, headed Money Laundering Reporting Officer. It clearly states that members and employees are obliged to report any suspicion of money laundering. Does that purely cover internal issues, or what about external issues? If I could just qualify that. What is the procedure if anything suspicious externally? Thank you.
Can we ask Angie to comment?
Thank you. I think when we talk about externally, it maybe depends on whether it's affecting the council as to who it should be reported to. But if you identify any concerns at all, and you want to talk to either myself or Trevor Wilson, then we can help you to make sure the information gets to the right source, to the right place.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Just to clarify, that's fine.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Mann wishes to comment.
Thank you, Chair. Fascinating subject, fascinating report. There have been any actual incidents of attempted sort of money laundering in our case in Brentford District Council, and in any significant examples elsewhere?
Can I ask Angie to comment, please? Again?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It looks like Trevor's come off mute as well. So,
well, whichever.
Yes.
You're the senior officer, so.
Yes. We've not had anything, or I've not had anything reported to me in recent years, but in my time as the responsible officer, I have had 2 occasions where I've had to submit reports through to the proper bodies, which have changed over the period of time that I've been involved with that. So one was in respect of a property transaction when we had the housing stock, so that suggests how long ago that one was. And then there was one in terms of what we then regarded as a large sum of cash being paid in for a business rates account a number of years ago, which was £3,000, and then with a request that the money is then refunded because there'd been an overpayment. So that was reported through. In terms of what actions were taken, and that we don't get told of that. So the emphasis is on reporting the incidents, and then the necessary bodies take whatever investigations they need from that point on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Trevor. If there's no one else wishing to comment, thank you. As Councillor Mann has said, a very interesting report. I won't bore everybody with my deep and dark times in the financial services business, where we were obviously aware of this, but it's a big issue. Happily not for our local authority anyway. It's asked that we approve this report. I'll take silent as agreement. Do I take it that the report has been approved? Thank you, members. The report has been approved. We will now proceed to agenda item 9, Treasury Management Mid-Year Report 2020-21, set out on pages 47 to 66 of the agenda. And may I please invite Phil Myers, Financial Service Manager, to set out the report.
Yes, good evening, Chair and members. So this is the half-year report on the Council's Treasury Management activities. So it sets out the position where we are at the half year and where we where we've updated our forecasts for the year compared with what was originally anticipated when the Treasury management strategy was first approved as part of the budget report, the Council's overall budget report in February. As with all these reports, there is a sort of an economic and market commentary that comes along with the report that's provided by the Council's Treasury Management Advisors. And obviously I think we all know what's dominated the events over the last six months. What we have seen as a result of that is a reduction in interest rates, and particularly around sort of money market rates. So we had you will see in the table that's in the report that for certain periods there have been sort of negative rates of return that have been on offered at various points during the year. The report also picks up on the Council's capital programme, and as the Chair mentioned just a moment ago, this year is quite a substantial year for the Council's capital programme. We've got a number of major projects on the go now, with the Manor Street, Horizon 120, and the improvement works in the town centre. So looking at where we anticipate our spending for the year, it's not significantly different from what we anticipated at the start of the year. As ever, we inevitably incur some slippage in our programme, so there's a sort of an allowance that's been made for some slippage in the programme. There's been some areas where spending has increased. So in the other services area, a couple of items in there. So the pedestrianisation, following a successful bid for money from the Department for Transport, which also brought in some additional money from Essex County Council. That's allowed for the scope of works in that area to be increased from what was originally anticipated. And we also, at the start of the year, a decision was made to make a contribution towards some improvement works in facilities used by the Council's recycling contractor. And therefore that's increased the capital programme, and that will be repaid over a number of years from a reduction in processing costs that are recharged back to the council. The table shows that there's been a switch. There's a table that shows the capital expenditure and the proposed financing. That's at paragraph 4.1. It does show that the actual financing of the programme for the year, there's a switch there between capital receipts and internal borrowing. That's primarily due to the fact that we now anticipate some of the capital receipts that are to be generated from the Manor Street development and Horizon 120 particularly. They're likely now to come to fruition in the next financial year. So the expenditure that we're incurring on those projects will be met through what's referred to as internal borrowing. So that's essentially using the council's own cash, reducing its short-term investments, which at the moment are not yielding very much anyway. And that internal borrowing will be sort of replenished when those receipts come into the council next year. The level of borrowing, external borrowing for the council, is not anticipated to change in the current year. So we still hold £6 million of legacy borrowing, and we've got some finance leases which are typically used for vehicles where we make annual repayments of those during the course of the year. So at the moment, there's no anticipation of increasing our external borrowing, although that's likely to be something that we'll see in the next few years as the strategic investment programme reaches its sort of peak of spending. The report refers to a consultation that the Treasury did during the year, particularly around the policy on lending to local authorities through the Public Works Loan Board. This seemed to be on the back of some concerns about authorities incurring increased borrowing to fund what are referred to as debt for yield projects. So specifically borrowing to buy commercial property. And there's been some notable cases where authorities have sort of been in the media about the levels of borrowing they've been incurring. So the government have seemed to sought to slow down that borrowing. They increased the cost of borrowing to local authorities, but through the consultation, they are seeking authorities' input into designing a new scheme which will continue to support local authorities in their debt financing, but takes away that sort of incentive to do the debt for yield activity. A response to that consultation was submitted by the Cabinet Member for Finance and Performance Management, and we await the outcome of that consultation. Investment activity during the year, that's been quite substantial, particularly in this first half of the financial year, largely because of the influx of cash from government, which it's paid to local authorities as part of the COVID-19 measures to support small and medium businesses, and also to provide support to those taxpayers that are in hardship circumstances. So a lot of that money has been channeled through local authorities. So whilst the grant schemes and various means of support were being implemented by the council, we have been carrying substantially more cash in this first half year than we would normally. And members note that at one point we were over £94 million. A lot of that cash we've just placed back effectively with UK government through the Debt Management Office, purely because you know, we wanted to minimise any risk on that money, because effectively we were just being custodians for a period of time. So security has been the key point with that money. Consequently, it does mean that we haven't actually earned a lot of income from that money, as the Debt Management Office are paying, well, at various periods, anything from 0 to 0.01%. And in fact, more recently, they've actually introduced negative rates for some very short dated deposits. The tables, there's two tables, one that gives a breakdown at paragraph 7.1, 7.10, which is on page 60, and that shows the investments made and matured and sold during the year across the different types. And then there is a table on page 61, which gives the income returns from each of those areas. The report does highlight that because of the low interest rates that we're now facing, and also because of the impact COVID has had on the corporate sector and their ability to pay dividends, and in some areas they're being dissuaded from paying dividends, then the income that we are forecasting from our Treasury management is £753,000 for the year, which is actually an underachievement against the budget of £306,000. We expect, as we move through towards the end of the year, that with the acceleration of the capital expenditure with our strategic investment programme, and also as some of this extra cash flow that has been provided via the government in the early part of the year, as that unravels, that our cash balances will reduce significantly over the remainder of this year to the end of March. There's an update on the council's pooled fund investments. Members recall that at the last meeting you were advised that the value of those funds had reduced significantly in light of market conditions at that time. Happily, that position has unwound to some degree, although overall there is still a shortfall on those funds in terms of market value. That's an unrealised loss. It would only become a real issue if we were to come out of those funds, which at the moment there's no suggestion or intention of doing that at the moment. Members will note that even with the reduced levels of dividend income from those funds, they are still yielding somewhere just slightly above 4% income return. Also at the last meeting was the mention about the CCLLA property fund, which had actually suspended dealing. So I'm happy to be able to report that that's now no longer the case. So the fund is now open for people to transact with that fund, albeit the timescale in which you have to give notice has been increased to 90 days. But again, it's not a fund we were looking. We are actively looking to take our investment out of at this current time. And then the report finishes with a bit of an outlook, which possibly anybody's guess really what's going to happen over the next 6 months as the coronavirus pandemic continues and changes. But also the issue that seemed to have dropped off the agenda for some time, but Brexit is obviously with us very soon as the transition period ends at the end of this calendar year. So at the moment, there's no suggestion that there's going to be any major change in interest rates, and the cost of borrowing measured through Treasury gilts are still likely to continue to be low for the foreseeable, with the risks very much at the moment to the downside on those. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. Before I open it to the floor, could I just ask 7.8 on page 50, new investments of over 800 million. Is that that must be a typo, isn't it, in 6 months? I mean, I know money goes in and out, but
yeah, no, Chair, that is right. And as I said, with the increase in money from government for the support measures, that's been rolled over at very short notice. So it's an accumulation of a lot of deals that have been done in a short period of time as grants have become payable.
okay, thank you very much. I have a question from from Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Very clear and comprehensive report as usual. Thank you very much. One tiny sort of detail in the capital programme. You've taken the sort of slip road out of the expenditure profile. Is that just because of sort of slippage in the actual project itself? Because it is still live, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. We're not suggesting that project's now no longer. No, what it is I think because it's not really a project that the Braintree Council are leading on. We're effectively we've made a commitment to provide a contribution. So we haven't got an exact timeline as to when that contribution will be required. So it's just been taken out of the sort of profiled spend, but it's still within the overall council's programme for the medium term. So, yep.
Thank you very much, Phil. And Councillor Eusden.
Thank you, Chair. On page 48, item 4.3, you referred just a few moments ago to the additional capital contribution towards recycling facilities, and that we will be repaid by way of a reduced fee that we're charged over a period of time. How long is that period of time? Please.
Yes. So it's tied in with the contract we have through the Suffolk Waste Partnership. So I think it's got, at the time of the contribution being made, that had 9 years to run. So that money is being recouped over the 9 years of that contract.
Okay, thank you very much.
And indeed, it could be, who knows, it could be continued after that, if it seems quite successful at the moment. Are there any other questions from members? Could I just ask, on strategic reserve, sorry, not strategic reserve, the Treasury reserve, how much is that, or is it does it change? Sorry, it's mentioned somewhere. Yeah, on 7.13, 7.13, Treasury Management Reserve. Fine.
Yeah, I can't recall the exact figure, but I think it's in the order of 1.2 million.
Okay. All right.
It's certainly more than a million. I'm pretty sure it's around 1.2 million. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So are there any other points that members wish to raise? I think, as always, it's an excellent report, and we
Chairman,
can.
apologies,
Yes,
Chairman, to interrupt you, but Councillor Santamora has indicated she wishes to speak.
Sorry, it's really not a difficult one, this one, but we've got paragraphs on pages 58, 59, and I think it's just a numbering exercise, but 7.3 and 7.8 don't exist. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, you're absolutely right there. Yeah, I think that's just a typo within the report. Trying to use the auto paragraph number within Word and have tables in between causes problems. But yes, yeah.
No, it's fine, not a criticism. I just, obviously, if someone reads through it, it looks as though it could be missing, but I expect it's typographical. Thank you.
Glad to see that people are reading it. That's excellent. So I don't think we've got any other points from members, and we're asked to recommend to Cabinet acceptance of the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report 2020-2021 prior to its submission to full Council. Do I take it that we approve the recommendation that Cabinet accept the mid-year report? Silence will be taken as an assent. So thank you, members. The recommendation has been approved, and we'll now proceed to agenda item 10, Monitoring Officer's Report on Standards. Members, this is set out on pages 67 to 72. Can I invite Kim Cole, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer, to set out the report?
Good evening, members. So this is the annual report of the Council's Monitoring Officer and covers the civic year from 2019 to 2020. The purpose of the report is to review the functions of the standards framework during the that particular civic year. Now, members will be aware that the Council has undertaken some change in terms of their monitoring officer, with my predecessor departing the Council in February 2020, with an interim monitoring officer being appointed just prior to my arrival, which took place in April of this year. The report sets out that the monitoring officer is the proper officer for receiving complaints in respect of member conduct. That includes complaints against district, parish and town councillors. In doing that, we're required to have arrangements in place for dealing with complaints, which is managed by myself. It's important to note that in complaints which relate to the failure to declare disclosable pecuniary interest or a breach of the councillor's requirement to register interest are referred to Essex Police, and those matters that fall outside of the council's jurisdiction in terms of investigating any allegations around those. The complaints received by my predecessors and myself are treated confidentially until completion of any investigation, and therefore it's not appropriate for this report to set out any of those particular details at this stage. During the year 1920, the monitoring officer received a number of formal complaints which have been considered. The key concerns related to the appropriateness of individual councillors' actions at various meetings, a number of challenges around perceptions of bias or unreasonable preference, and a small number of parish clerks had raised issues around individual members' behaviours. The report sets out that there is one complaint that was received early in 2019-20 that was referred to an investigation. At the time of preparing this report, that complaint was still live, and as live complaints are treated confidentially, it's not been set out in this particular report. That matter will be concluded shortly and will be brought forward to the committee to note in due course. Referrals to the standard subcommittee, I'm aware that there hasn't been any made during that particular year, and similarly there's been no referrals made to Essex Police around non-disclosure of pecuniary interests. There's been no applications for dispensations by district councillors during that period, and similarly there's been none delegated to parish councillors during that period either. Registers of interest are maintained by the monitoring officer and the governance team, and we also publish parish and town councils' interests as well. That's available on our website. However, it is the responsibility of the councillors to ensure that their registers are up to date, and periodically the governance team do send out reminders to members to come forward with any changes, I believe on a 6-monthly basis. Going forward, members will be aware that I am currently conducting a substantive review of the Council's constitution and its governance processes. That will include the Code of Conduct for members and the associated complaints procedure. And that will come through to the Corporate Governance Group for consideration at the appropriate time. The programme has been set out. We are doing it in a number of waves. I believe the first wave is coming to this group on the 12th of November. And the intention is that through the various waves, the final updated constitution governance processes where needed will go to full council on the 29th of March next year for formal approval. Following the adoption of that full new constitution, the intention is to conduct a number of training exercises with members to talk through the changes in detail and to set out some of the the amendments and the ways of working going forward, and to bring forward the new constitution and bring it back into members' minds and hopefully hearts as a usable document going forward, because it is a key document for the council, and it does set out all the ways of which we work and how we make decisions. So it is important that we are fully aware of what's included in it. So I will do my best to sell it to all members as we progress through. Outside of that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Kim. Any a question from Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Chair. On page 70, and you've made reference to it, there have been a number of challenges around perceptions. Now, a small number of parish clerks have had issues with individual members about challenging behaviours. Is that our members or their members?
It's it could be both. No, in terms of the complaints we've received, it's around parish members.
There's thank you very much, Kim, and Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I've always felt, and I think I may have mentioned this before, that the code of conduct is something which I've never fully understood. We've never actually fully had explained to us. There's certain, if you read through the code of conduct, the present one, you can look at some aspects, and I've done this, could be misinterpreted. There's certainly you can take either way. And also, it is a laborious system at the moment, which I'm sure we're going to look at and shorten, which if something, rumours don't spread through councils, but nothing is ever said about it, not necessarily to explain what's happened. But things tend to say, well, there's an investigation, etc., etc. And for anybody involved in these issues, and I think there are some issues at the moment which have not been resolved for a considerable time, how can we foreshorten that? Because it's not very nice for those involved, that's for sure. And it's never been fully explained as to what the procedure is and how it's happening. I've never fully understood that, and I'd like to have some reassurance. I think I've mentioned this before, that we can improve matters. Maybe as age progresses, I don't fully understand things, but I'd like some inspiration from you. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely fine. I think the complaints procedure can be confusing, and for those that aren't involved in the process at that particular time, can feel that there's a lack of information coming out and an understanding as to where the procedure has reached. Part of the review will look at some of that. It will look at the timescales involved. I know there has been some delay around some of the complaints that have come forward recently, particularly because of the circumstances we're dealing in has naturally brought some delay, but also just around historical reasoning. So I think going forward, we've had a look at the code of conduct, we've had a look at the model draft that came before this committee last month, I think, or the month before, and we fed back that, and we're waiting for an update from the LGA as to whether they are looking at bringing that model in. If they are looking at bringing that model in, then that will feed into our governance review, and we will look to strengthen the code itself and some of the wording around it, and then the procedure that sits behind it, so that officers and members are aware of the process from start to finish and how matters are reported in terms of their outcome. If that model doesn't come forward in time for us when we do our wave 2, which is where the code, I think it's wave 3, sorry, where the code of conduct sits in terms of our governance review at the council, we will look to just strengthen the code of conduct that we've got in terms of its clarity, removing some ambiguity, and bring in a new procedure that sits behind it to strengthen that process.
Thank you. Some of the complaints have been vindictive and unrealistic, I think, so that needs to be looked at, I'm sure, and judged. Thank you.
Chairman, could I just add just a point that Councillor Johnson made at the beginning about the publication around the code of conduct and the awareness that members have on the code. And I totally understand Councillor Johnson's view, but obviously, this is a public meeting, and I just want to give anybody who is watching the meeting that members do receive training on the Code of Conduct, and it was actually part of a one-day session on the member induction programme, which was mandatory for all members to attend. I was one of the presenting officers, and we had quite a long day on the code and the various elements, and it's a part of the training session which we do require all members to attend, and we took at great lengths to take members through. So I'm disappointed that that Councillor Johnson does have that view, but I do entirely accept, as time goes on, less familiarity around the code sort of creeps in, because it's a document that we hope that you don't need to refer to because it's embedded in your day-to-day behaviours. I mean, it's a document that we don't hope to see to come out in normal circumstances, because it's really your rule book of things you must not do. So hopefully going forward, as Kim's already said in her presentation, we'll be looking to do more training, but it would be helpful when we sort of get to that part of the code, that maybe some of your reflections on the previous training and how we presented that is considered when you give your feedback, because it will only help to build a better programme going forward, which will obviously help us to support you with the code going forward.
Thank you very much, Emma. I hope that gives some, not consolation, that's not the word, but you know, a good explanation of the reality. And I can only suggest that because happily, as far as I'm aware, in Braintree District, we do not have a lot of this unpleasant behaviour, that you know, we aren't as aware of it as we need to be, or as we should be. And I think perhaps some training might be worth looking at again as one of the development meetings. I'll leave that to the monitoring officer to consider.
I'm happy to take that away, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions from members? Councillor Santamaro.
Yes, sorry, it was really just to supplement what Emma was just saying. I think I've always felt really supported as a councillor, and if I've had any queries, I've always literally called the governance team, and they're on the phone ready to answer any queries. So for those members that aren't as familiar with the Code of Conduct or need a refresher or have any questions, they're always there. So again, I probably echo Emma's disappointment from the other side, but yeah, maybe training would be, you know, a refresher course would be good, but the officers are always there any time of the year. So just remember that.
I'm grateful, thank you. And as I say, we will be rolling out training once we've got the new constitution, which will include all of the new revised policies and procedures. So we can build that into next year's programme.
Thank you, Councillor Santamaro and Kim. I guess it's you're now getting your feet under the table and or your teeth into it, whatever the expression is, and it's good to see. That's so. In terms of the conduct, the Code of Conduct, that's one thing, and the Constitution. If I can just mention for colleagues that as chairman of this group, I was part of the Developing Democracy group, which has had a first look at the Constitution, or the amendment to Constitution. And thank you all in advance for making yourself available for the extra corporate government meetings to look at this Constitution over the next couple of months. Thanks for your forbearance. There'll be plenty of reading for you, I'm sure. We'll be pleased at that. So if we have no further questions, thank you very much, Kim, for your presentation. We are asked to note the report. As usual, I'll take silence as agreement. Do I take it that the report has been noted? Thank you very much, members. The report is noted. We'll now proceed to agenda item 11, urgent business. I can confirm that there is no urgent business for consideration at this meeting. So members, we have now concluded our business for this evening, and I will close this meeting of the Corporate Governance Group at 8:30. Thank you, members, for your attendance this evening, and to those watching the broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel. I'll now hand over to the meeting facilitator.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, before I ask the webcasting officer to terminate the broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel, please can I remind members that the Council will be retaining performance data relating to your connection to this meeting. This is held just in case we have a legal challenge to the way that we've held this meeting. Webcasting officer, please can you terminate the broadcast and confirm, please?